Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered for Friday, April 12th, 2019. My name is Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, in for Roland Martin, who will be back on Monday. So here we go again. Someone is lying about an attack in Chicago, but this time, no outrage from the mayor or police chief, maybe because this time it's the cops who got caught lying. There's video proof. This is an indictment. This is an incitement to violence on progressive women of color. That's what New York Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez said about a reprehensible New York Post cover attacking Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Georgetown University students voted overwhelmingly to pay for reparations to the descendants of slaves sold to shore up the finances of the school in the 19th century. J.P. Morgan Chase Bank CEO Jamie Dimon gets a lesson on how hard it is to live on the salary he pays his own bank tellers. And one of the victims shot in the Nipsey Hussle murder has been arrested for association with Nipsey, according to TMZ. Plus, we'll get an insider's view of what went down in the Staples Center with one of our panelists who was there. Can negative stereotypes about our own bodies lead to an actual mental disorder? A young sister says yes. We'll break that down. And speaking of young sisters, 14-year-old Marsai Martin, a star on ABC's Blackish, has become the youngest executive executive producer in Hollywood history. Her movie Little opens this weekend. Now that's some black girl magic. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
So the city of Chicago filed suit this week against Empire actor Jussie Smollett to recover the $130,000 it said it cost them to investigate his allegations of a hate crime. Chicago's mayor and police superintendent held multiple news conferences to express their outrage over lies they said Smollett told. Okay, let's see how they respond to the lies told by Chicago police officers about an incident at Marshall High School in Chicago. The officers filed a police report that said a student at the school kicked, bit, and spit on the officers, and that her actions led the two officers and the student to fall down a flight of stairs. In the arrest report, the officers said the student, 16-year-old Nigma Howard, quote, initiated a physical altercation with the officers. Yep. There is video. So let's see how the officers' stories hold up. There is no sound, but the pictures will tell the story all too well. So the officers are no longer working in the school. Charges against the girl were dropped. The family is suing, and there is body cam footage still to come. We'll keep you posted. So joining me on the panel here in our studio is communications strategist Kelly Betha, CJ Jordan, CEO of the Jordan Management Group, Joseph Williams, senior editor of the U.S. News and World Report, and on Skype from Philadelphia, we have Teresa Lundy, founder of TML Communications. All right, so the New York Post, I guess we take a second to talk about that. You know, when I look at that particular video footage, and we see once again, time and time again, examples of police telling one story in police reports, but when evidence pops up, there's something completely different. It makes you wonder, with all of this righteous indignation that's going on with the Jussie Smollett case, when will Chicago sort of wake up to what really needs to be done in that police department to root out the huge dysfunction and injustice that's become a part of the system in that city and beyond? What are your thoughts?
I'm really speechless, you know, because this happened to a child. We're not talking about, you know, a grown man, a grown woman. We're talking about someone's baby. She's 16 years old. She was in a school setting, and from the looks of that video, it didn't look like there was any altercation between her and the officers at all before they threw her downstairs. And my issue with this is not only the over-policing of our black children in schools, but the dissociation that these officers have when it comes to exactly who these children are. I'm sure that a lot of these officers have their own children or know people with children. They wouldn't want anybody treating their child like that, or their niece or their nephew or their brother or sister. So what makes you think that you have the agency to do something like that just because you have a gun strapped to yourself? It's absurd.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? I mean, they could probably sue Jussie Smollett, and the money that comes in from that lawsuit will go to pay out the parents of this young girl. And it's not anything that we haven't seen before. So I wish I could say I was shocked. I mean, certainly the images are just breathtaking. But I mean, we've been here before. And with as many school resource officers, cops, whatever you want to call them, in schools, this is one that happened to get caught on film. I mean, we know this sort of thing happens probably every day in at least, a handful of schools around the country. This is one we see, right?
Yeah.
And coming on the heels of the Jussie Smollett case, which in turn came on the heels of a lot of Chicago police officers, the Quan McDonald verdict, and a situation in the Chicago police force a couple of years ago where it was discovered that they had secret torture sites where they would drag victims to. It's not that surprising to me that Chicago cops would get caught on camera doing something like this to a child. And it's also not surprising to me that we don't see any outrage from the mayor or from the chief of police beyond a rote statement.
Absolutely. So, Teresa, I'd love to bring you in on this. When we talk about this issue, as was mentioned previously, of these so-called resource officers in schools that are literally abusing and attacking our children as part also of a sort of system of repression, of violence, of just complete dysfunction in the Chicago Police Department. What are parents to do when we are in situations where we're trusting our children to get a safe education and we find out that their attackers are actually the ones who are there supposedly to protect them?
And that's putting us actually in a really hard position, right? So parents, loved ones of those that we entrust to educate the students without putting excessive force seems like almost the norm for them to not make. Seems like the norm for everyday violence for African Americans, right? And so I see this case as another incident that the police department, obviously, with the Jussie Smollett case, wants to really undermine some of the outer layers of what's actually going on in the department. And let's just be honest, this is going on in departments across municipalities, across cities, across the country. So I think an overhaul review and an analysis of best practices and training of what's going on in the office would really start to change the mindset of some of these officers if city government actually takes charge and does something different.
But see, Ava, I have to tell you, I mean, we've been here before so many times.
Yeah.
And training, Chicago police has been under consent decree. They've been out of a consent decree. Training has not been the issue. I mean, they can train up police officers. And yeah, it's a good step. It's a first start. But it has to go beyond that. It is systemic. It keeps happening. It reminds me of the case that happened in North Carolina where the police officer came into the classroom.
Yeah.
The only aberration here was that it was not a black boy.
Yeah.
It was a black girl.
Yeah.
And as we know that, black men or black boys are more often to be disciplined and more often to face that kind of punishment than any other cohort in a school at all. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and it has to start somewhere, and it's got to be broader than just training.
Well, what I think is interesting, though, if you look at what's going on with the Jussie Smollett situation, to me, why not use that as a standard bearer? I mean, if you're saying that he needs to pay out $100,000 and some plus because of the lost man hours with regards to his lie, the city itself has paid out over $100 million in lawsuits to families who have been victimized by police violence, and not one cop has paid a dime to reimburse the city for those millions of dollars. If they want to set a precedent with Jussie, shouldn't they also live by the same precedent under these circumstances?
I think that's a very fair argument. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen because in the grand scheme of things, what it looks like is that it's almost cheaper to pay out a settlement between, the plaintiff and Chicago police than it is to actually reform the entire department. And that's a sad thing to say, but that's what it's looking like, $100 million plus, compared to the billions of dollars that you're having to invest in an entire police department and what the police would have to pay back, et cetera, et cetera. I think, the cost-benefit analysis of what you're saying isn't in favor of, frankly, doing the right thing.
Well, but see, here's one thing that is in favor of doing the right thing is insurance companies. These departments are insured, these cities are insured, and if the insurers come to them, as happened in one small town in California, cops beating people up, cops having sex with detainees, just really bad behavior top to bottom, and the city was paying out lump sum settlement after lump sum settlement. So the insurers came in and say, hey, we're going to cut your policy off unless you get a handle on this, unless you fix your broken equipment, unless you get enhanced training, and unless you bring these officers to heel either by firing, termination, or some other kind of reprimand, we're going to cancel your policy.
Yeah.
Now, this was a small town and not the city of Chicago, which presumably has enough insurance to cover these losses for a while. I mean, clearly, the pattern has not changed at all.
Right.
So something has to happen to hit them in the pocketbook, and that will force a chain of events that will get the officers under heel and will get the training that's needed to bring this down.
I understand that I grossly underestimated. The city of Chicago has paid out over $700 million. And so what it seems like to me, what we're seeing here is just the valuation of injuries, perceived injuries to whiteness, versus the degree to which injuries to blackness are completely ignored and devalued. The fact that they would be willing, even with these insurance payments that I'm sure they're having to pay, they would be willing to pay out $700 million and just say, okay, well, let's go on to the next one. Yet they want to hold Jesse's feet to the fire for $100,000, just to me shows how much they valued protecting the myth of the pristineness of whiteness versus the reality of abuses against black and brown people.
Absolutely.
Well, it's not called a
Absolutely.
thin blue line for nothing.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yes.
and just to add a little tidbit, but that's why you have more families and parents going into the charter school space because, you know, most of the charter schools that has been popping up in Chicago are thinking about New Leaf. They're not putting security measures at the door, making it feel like it's prison when a student comes in and they have to be searched from head to toe. Wow. So I think, you know, looking at some of those alternatives, and especially as it relates to the training of what I was saying on the inside early on, I think the trainings really just have to be really in-depth, a real in-depth analysis approach of what's going on in the police department, and also understand that we need to maybe reform some sort of local and state funding that they get funded every year to in order for that school to exist.
Yeah, but
I just think heads need to roll. Exactly, heads need to roll. People need to go to jail. People need to be fired. Or people need to pay back, reimburse the city in the same way that they're trying to get Jesse to reimburse the city. That's what needs to happen. So in terms of the next story, the New York Post is owned by Rupert Murdoch, the same man who employs white nationalists like Tucker Carlson on Fox News, which he also owns. The Post ran this cover yesterday. Representative Ilhan Omar, 9/11 was some people did something, the headline reads. Here's your something. So let's leave aside for the moment that the Post was exploiting the deaths of 3,000 people to score a political point. That's despicable on its own. The whole thing got going when Minnesota Congresswoman Omar said a while back that the Council on American Islamic Relations was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. The right-wing attacks on Omar are meant to scare white people, that people of color, and especially women of color, are gaining power, which we are, of course. But these attacks are also dangerous. One man has already been arrested for threatening to kill Congresswoman Omar. Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley tweeted this. Ilhan's full comments clearly speak to post-9/11 Islamophobia. Manipulating her remarks is defaming and dangerous for her and her family. Stop with this recklessness. Rupert Murdoch, this is on you, stoking hate, fear, and division, putting real lives at risk. Shame on you. And New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this.
Violence against progressive women of color. And if they can't figure out how to get it back to policy, we need to call it out for what it is, because this is not normal, and this is not a normal level of political debate or rhetoric. As wild as it can get sometimes, this is something beyond what is normal.
So I want to start off with Teresa, bringing you back in on Skype. I mean, the irresponsibility of these relentless attacks against not only Ilhan, but frankly, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many of the women of color, the new freshman congresswomen, has been absolutely relentless. You know, what do you think needs to happen in order to sort of cause some sort of reprieve as it relates to this? What's going on that can be stopped?
Well, it's going to take everyone. It's going to take everyone to unify in the Congress, because as of right now, people are still bitter that the progressive women, the newly freshman women, are coming in with fresh ideas and are looking to take part in their government as they see fit for their next generation. So I think the old traditional system really needs to take a step back and really understand that change is here. Also, obviously decrease the rhetoric, but also understand that the purpose of these women and other advocacy and organizations, and why the progressive movement was formed, was because they felt like their voices weren't being heard. So I think, in the midst of all the political minutia, there should be a light at the end of the tunnel very soon for those who really honor our country and want to see it more unified than divided.
I think she brings up a good point here. To me, the Democrats have been MIA on this situation. They've just kind of left them out there to flounder, in my opinion. I mean, what do you think is the responsibility of some of these Democratic leaders who have not stepped up to the plate to defend these women, I think, in a very powerful way?
Well, I think part of there are two problems here. The first is that the middle of the road Democratic base themselves are in a way threatened by representatives like Omar and the other women of color who have come in the freshman class. And the second part of that is there is some latent kind of liberal racism is one way of phrasing it. But the thing that strikes me most about this story is the fact that none of the other women, save for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have been singled out in this way. And I think that it's because Representative Omar is wearing a hijab.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. She's not the first Muslim to serve in Congress. Keith Ellison was.
Right.
She's not the first woman of color to serve in Congress. They've got Barbara Lee and some other women from California.
Yeah.
And even Auntie Maxine has been the subject of a lot of violent vitriol because she is a woman of color. But it's gone to a new level with Representative Omar because I think she has the temerity to wear a hijab and express her religion, in something other than Christianity and a prayer at the beginning of the session. So I think the Democrats need to step up and step in and step behind her. Speaker Pelosi, first and foremost among them, she still may be a little salty because of what happened earlier on with her remarks about AIPAC with Representative Ilhan Omar. But she's got to do something. She's got to put her foot down. She's got to step up and get other members to rally behind this one woman who is speaking her own truth.
Absolutely. To me, it's like she's the perfect storm. She's a walking perfect storm because she's a woman, she's black, she's Muslim, she wears a hijab. I mean, she's like everything that they're scared of.
Which ironically is the reason why she got elected. She represents a district that has a lot of Muslim constituents.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
My point is really to the fact that he was saying regarding the fact that she's wearing a hijab. This is not about her being a woman. This is not about her being Islamic. This is about her wearing a hijab and the ignorance of others regarding what a hijab means, regarding how many people wear a hijab, how many other religions wear head coverings, nuns included.
Right.
This isn't, a symbol of terrorism. If anything, if you want to take it there, you could argue that Eurocentric white Christianity would be a vessel for terrorism, right? Because the people who are actually going and doing these terrible things regarding the bombing of churches, to the shootings, to anything else, they say in the name of Jesus. They say in the name of God, not the God of Allah and those who,
The Klan is a Christian organization.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And if keep that same energy for your own house.
Yeah.
Because this isn't what Ilhan Omar is doing isn't what they're doing at all. She's not associated with a terrorist group. She's not associated with anything unpatriotic. She's associated with her district. She's representing her district. And it just so happens that the intersectionality of herself is what got her elected. But more importantly, she's representing a diverse district. And that's just let her do her job.
Absolutely. And she's not afraid of him.
And she's not afraid of him.
I think she really scares the heck out of him. So notice how reparations for slavery keeps coming up in the political conversations these days, right? You hear it on cable news, you see it in newspapers. Why? Because the Democratic candidates for president know that they need black votes to win the nomination and the general election. It's a testament to the power of African Americans that this is even on the table. Well, today we learned that students at Georgetown University here in Washington, D.C. overwhelmingly approved a plan to have every student pay a little over $50 a year for reparations. The money would go to the nearly 4,000 descendants of 272 African slaves that Georgetown sold in 1838 to boost the university's finances. The referendum is not binding on the university, but it's one of the first concrete steps to address the legacy of slavery. Public opinions on reparations is not surprisingly divided by race. In a new Marist poll commissioned by public TV station WGBH, 15% of white people support reparations. 58% of African Americans support reparations. The reason for this may be that a majority of African Americans do not think the wealth of the United States is significantly tied to work done by slaves. I really wonder how it just kind of magically appeared, right? Okay. One glimmer of light in that misread of history, 71% of Americans think the history of slavery and other forms of racial discrimination is at least a minor factor in the wealth disparity between white and black Americans. So, it's interesting how people think that the wealth that Americans in general, not specifically African Americans, but Americans in general, believe that the wealth apparently just sort of magically happened. How did it get here, you guys?
Godmother with sprinkles and rainbows and
glitter,
it's just
unicorn,
bippity boppity, But in this case, you can actually trace the benefits of slavery regarding this university. The main reason why this referendum came in place is because they have proof that the benefits of slavery is what prompted how significant this university was. Georgetown? Yeah. So with Georgetown University being Georgetown University, they understand that, selling those slaves is what got them out of debt.
Right.
So there's a direct correlation there. So I think in this case, the referendum actually makes sense, and reparations actually make sense in this case. I'm not saying that I'm against reparations, but I do understand the notion of how people think that what slavery did wasn't directly correlated, because people don't see that far down the line, right? They just see, maybe 20 years, 30 years, 100 years. And I think the ignorance of exactly the contributions that slaves made of this country is what's prompting that poll to be what it is.
Absolutely. When I think of reparations, though, to me at least, I think about it as not only payment for work that was done for free, which obviously, and all the abuses that occurred during that time in terms of the murders, the separation of families, the torture, everything that happened.
Right.
But I also think of the 100+ years of oppression and terrorism that happened after slavery.
Of
They
course.
get that for free.
Yeah, I know. It's like honestly, we have as a people, we just had, if you look at the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, we just recently got to a point in this country where we at least had some level of legal equality.
And even that's being taken away, especially when it comes to the Voting Rights Act.
Absolutely. So you don't have to go back way back to figure out why African Americans in particular are owed money.
But see, part of my frustration with this issue is the fact that it goes back to our educational system. I mean, we barely teach history at all, much less history of African American descent.
Absolutely.
And we don't want to make white people feel bad. They don't like to feel bad, because if they feel bad about something that happened, it becomes like this trauma. And I mentioned this, and it gets me really agitated because I was recently at a family event, a couple of days ago, in fact, and I talked with my mother, who graduated from Havre de Grace Colored High School.
Wow.
My mother,
Wow.
Havre de Grace Colored High School now has a foundation to keep the memory alive.
Right.
And then I talked to some of my uncles who told me that in Maryland, it was not illegal for you to continue your education. You could go to school up to the 8th grade if you were black, and if you were black and lived in Harford County, Maryland, which my parents were, school was it. That was it. There was no high school.
Right.
Until these folks got together and created a segregated high school.
Right.
Out of whole cloth, right? So you're talking about a system, I mean, it's called systemic racism for a reason, right?
Right.
But you're talking about a system that is not yet fully dismantled. And you're talking about a system where there are people who are alive today, who are descendants, direct descendants or of not if not from slaves that's proof in a direct straight line, but certainly of people who had to suffer the legacy of discrimination.
Absolutely.
I mean, as my mother went to a segregated high school, my grandmother didn't go to high school at all because there was not a high school for black people.
Absolutely. I mean, when my grandmother, when she passed, they weren't producing, for example, birth certificates for black people, right? And so she had to really kind of guesstimate. We had to sort of guesstimate the year to put on her tombstone because there was no proof. When I think of the fact that I had the very interesting experience growing up of actually going to school with the family who, way back in the day, owned my descendants.
Wow.
And learning that in high school,
Wow.
right?
Which is so profound.
It is. It is. It's amazing. So, Teresa, I want to bring you into this. I mean, what are your thoughts about? I think the Georgetown students really should be congratulated for really sort of looking at this issue and saying we can do something specific and something substantive for these individuals that we have documented evidence how they have suffered and, quite frankly, how our institution has benefited because of their sacrifices.
So I definitely want to congratulate the Georgetown students for taking that initiative, because more so it is stemming from the African American Studies Department and Civil Liberties. So, but what I do want us to take apart is the historically black colleges, and so I would like to see what they are doing now to address this as well, because I haven't heard as much conversation around like in Philly we have Cheney University, or Pennsylvania, and so you know, as they're raising money, you know, but I'm not hearing the HBCUs talk about some of these issues that are national issues. So I think for me, you know, kind of looking at that intergenerational disparity, but also really owning on, you know, this historically black colleges also do play a role, because there is a reason why they function the way they do, but I'm just not hearing them more so in this conversation. I just want to know why. In
terms of them being owed reparations as it relates to their whole history of how and why they were created, is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. And really sort of other thoughts on this entire situation. When I think about it, I'm thinking, wow, it's wonderful to hear this discussion, but it's interesting to hear sort of the pushback. And I'm thinking if we can figure out how to pay everybody else, I think we can figure out how to pay black folk. I don't know. Well, I'm just going out on a limb here. It doesn't
necessarily, I mean, the two thoughts come to mind when you talk about the Georgetown students in particular, right?
Right.
Idealistic youth, right, which is, you know, we need more of that. But, you know, in terms of going forward, the second thought that I have is, at this point in their lives, they don't have anything to lose.
Right.
And I think that's what ends up being the muck and the mire of the reparations discussion, is that if you're a college student at Georgetown, even if you're paying your own tuition, $27, not that big a deal.
Especially not on a Georgetown bill.
Well, exactly. that's like 1 week.
Right.
That's like one night in a meal hall.
Right? Lord, no.
But the thing is that they felt like they wanted to make a statement because it's idealistic, but they didn't have anything to lose.
Right.
And white people tend to think that they have things to lose when you start talking about reparations.
Yeah.
And it goes back to a larger picture where if you get social programs or trying to, you know, things to try to lift up communities that have been systemically left behind and have had such a hard time because of discrimination, white people think it's a zero-sum game. They win, I lose.
Right.
And that's why we're hung up on the rocks of this whole debate, especially when it gets to a national issue.
Absolutely. Super quickly.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point regarding Teresa's comment on HBCUs not getting on the discussion. I could argue that may be not true. It's not. It's just not in the same light as what Georgetown is doing. I do know that in Maryland, they just came off a case in federal court saying that de jure segregation of the HBCUs and the PWIs in the state of Maryland was still existing, and they are actually getting some of their programs back. And some of the PWIs in Maryland are actually prohibited from doing some programs anymore because of the ramifications of that case. So it's happening in spurts, but I understand her point regarding why she would think that it's not necessarily an issue with HBCUs, or that they're not taking on that issue.
Gotcha. Well, let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about our bodies, our self-image, and its impact on our mental health.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
So we definitely want you to tune in on Monday because we will have here on the show a descendant of the Georgetown individuals who were enslaved and who were actually sold in order to save that university. So you do not want to miss that. So Jamie Dimon is the CEO of the enormous bank, J.P. Morgan Chase. He's a billionaire. And he was on Capitol Hill this week to testify in front of Congresswoman Maxine Waters' Financial Services Committee. There was one exchange with California freshman Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter that shone a bright light on income inequality at the personal level. Porter talked about a single mom who was a full-time job at the branch of Dimon's bank.
Where we left off was this woman had, and I apologize, you're going to need to follow orally. She had $2,425 a month. She rents a one-bedroom apartment. She and her daughter sleep together in the same room. In Irvine, California, that average one-bedroom apartment is going to be $1,600. She spends $100 on utilities. Take away the $1,700, and she has net $725. She's like me. She drives a 2008 minivan and has gas. $400 for car expenses and gas. Net $325. The Department of Agriculture says a low-cost food budget, that is ramen noodles, a low food budget is $400. That leaves her $77 in the red. She has a Cricket cell phone, the cheapest cell phone she can get for $40. She's in the red $117 a month. She has after-school childcare because the bank is open during normal business hours. That's $450 a month. That takes her down to negative $567 per month. My question for you, Mr. Dimon, is how should she manage this budget shortfall while she's working full-time at your bank?
I don't know that all your numbers are accurate. That number is generally a starter job.
She is a starting employee. She has a 6-year-old child. This is her first job.
And you can get those jobs at a high school, and she may have my job one day. So
she may, but Mr. Dimon, she doesn't have the ability right now to spend your $31 million.
I'm totally sympathetic.
She's short $567. What would you suggest she do?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Would you recommend that she take out a J.P. Morgan Chase credit card and run a deficit?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Would you recommend that she overdraft at your bank and be charged overdraft fees?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
So I know you have a lot
I'd love to call her up and have a conversation about her financial affairs and see if we can be helpful.
See if you can find a way for her to live on less than the minimum that I've described.
Just be helpful.
Well, I appreciate your desire to be helpful, but what I'd like you to do is provide a way for families to make ends meet so that little kids who are 6 years old living in a one-bedroom apartment with their mother aren't going hungry at night because they're $567 short from feeding themselves, clothing them. We allowed no money for clothing. We allowed no money for school lunches. We allowed no money for field trips, no money for medical, no money for prescription drugs, nothing. And she's short $567 already. Mr. Dimon, you know how to spend $31 million a year in salary, and you can't figure out how to make up a $567 a month shortfall. This is a budget problem you cannot solve.
Well, I guess she told him, you know what would be helpful? More money. That would be helpful. Don't you think?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I mean, and it's not just J.P. Morgan doing this. Like that whole panel probably has some aspect of their business where they're lowballing their employees.
Absolutely.
And it's insulting because you want us to do the jobs that you know how to do, but you don't want us to. You don't pay us our worth, period. Right. And it goes beyond, like I said, it just goes beyond J.P. Morgan. It goes beyond, just that panel. Like employees aren't asking to become billionaires. Right. Like the Congresswoman was saying, they're asking to live. They're asking to have a quality of life that is better than their parents, and set up a situation in which they can have better for their children. That's it. And the fact that he couldn't figure out on the spot how to close less than $1,000 budget, but you're making $31 million. I mean, how smart are you really?
Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think, years ago I used to work for this place called Institute for Women's Policy Research, and the woman there who was the head, the economist, used to always say, poverty is one of those problems where you actually can solve by throwing money at it. I mean, let's just be real about it now. There is no magic that you can do with those numbers, right? She needs more money. Where did we get to this point where executives are making millions and the people who are really making him the money, because she's the one that's interacting with the customers, if she wasn't there, he wouldn't have a freaking bank, but she can't even live on her salary.
Well, and I looked up this ratio really quick. The average CEO pay is 271 times that of their employees.
Ridiculous.
And that's for an employee who are making $58,000. 271 times. And that's if you're making $52,000.
Yeah.
And the other thing that the other two impressions that I came away with watching that video, first is total rogues gallery in front on the witness table. White guy after white guy after white guy after white.
But she might have his job someday.
She might have his own.
How?
Well,
How? With what? With what?
That's the thing.
That's the lie. That's the lie they dangle in front of people.
It really is. And there were two things. You know, the rogues gallery was number one. Number two was his sort of not contempt per se, but kind of condescension that I could help her.
Just
I could help you
flippant.
I could help you manage your budget. It's okay. Come to me. I'm an expert. But it was an object lesson in how the rich feel about the poor.
Yeah.
If you are poor or if you're barely getting by, it's your fault.
Yeah.
There is something that you are doing wrong. I, Jamie Dimon, multimillionaire, can help you get on the right path to where your bills equal out every month.
What's wrong is that she's working at J.P. Morgan.
Well,
that's a whole other problem.
And the other thing is that when I was a teenager working at a bank, and I heard the expression that when you handle the money, the less money you make. And the more money you make for the people, the further away you are from the money, the more money you're going to make.
Yeah.
And this was clear. And you need to focus down on these issues because it is a woman problem, it is a man problem, it is a child problem that Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan is not going to see.
Absolutely. So, Teresa, you know, what really struck me is his sort of, his distancing of himself from this. And like you said, his projection of whose fault it was. Well, you know, this is a starting salary. Well, you know, she probably just has a high school degree. Does that really mean that it's okay for her to work full time and not be able to make ends meet at the end of the month?
No, it's not okay. But what he did was an expression that most billionaire CEOs do in that type of position is pretty much the deflection technique. And so with deflection, they pretty much like, you know, our CFO or our analysis can handle those type of concerns and they'll get back to you. So him even asking for her telephone number to even call her and see if, you know, a consultation can be had really, again, it just demeans the situation at hand. But I also want to definitely take a look. There was and I'm actually looking up the study. There's a report that had to do with, you know, what employers are looking for, especially in the retail. They don't expect you to be single mothers or have children. They expect you just to work and go to school. And so if that's the case, yes, that starting salary actually works. But what needs to happen is a overhaul of analysis on the total funds that are coming in and looking at what the best practices are for those who may want to have a family.
My goodness. Well, you know, the bottom line is it's very interesting how this all comes together because a lot of these same people who will be defending the J.P. Morgan and Chases will be the same people that are telling women they shouldn't have the right to choose whether or not they bring a child into this world. And so they're setting up a scenario where you will have more women who won't be able to make ends meet because they're working jobs that are based on a salary that's not supposed to even provide for individuals that have children to take care of. An interesting situation. So moving on, late out of L.A., one of the victims shot in the Nipsey Hussle murder has been arrested for associating with Nipsey, according to TMZ. Sources with direct knowledge tell TMZ that Kerry Lathan, a 56-year-old man who was shot in the back outside of Nipsey's Marathon clothing store, was taken to the hospital a week ago Sunday, treated and released. 5 days after the shooting, Lathan, who is out on parole after serving 20 years for murder, was arrested at his halfway house for associating with a known gang member. Who was that? It was Nipsey. Teresa, you were there at the memorial. What did it feel like inside the Staples Center?
So it was a celebration of life, and actually being there, I was working with Tidal at the time with the production company, ESM Productions, and they were live streaming the content. So I think, my position there, kind of helping with that analytics, I got to see, those who were walking behind the scenes, the celebrities that were walking through, and when they got on the stage. Family, obviously was distraught. The celebrities, had a moment of silence, from Meek Mill, from Snoop Dogg, but everybody more so was there from the heart. They were respectful. A lot of people actually refrained from taking a lot of selfies and took posting during it. So I think some of the words, and I'm particularly talking about Snoop Dogg, about how he felt about his friend, was really about how he understood Nipsey as being that community leader and that forethought Black economics entrepreneur that everybody knows and loves. And I think a lot of that knowing about Nipsey, even if people just understood what his music did, but not necessarily what he did in the community, they really felt, especially in that room, that he was about more than just himself. And I think everybody who spoke in those posts, in the audience, felt the same way, and they wanted to take it back to their city. So
Absolutely.
It was a celebration of life, and not really a funeral, but literally a celebration of how to do better for the community.
That's beautiful. So you mentioned Snoop. We have a clip that allows us to hear a little bit about what he had to say.
And I want to say this. If it so happens to be that your kids die before you, Nipsey's mother prepared us for this day in the future. Thank you, Mother. Now, I didn't grow up with Nip. I didn't grow up with him in the neighborhood as a kid, but I watched Nip grow up in front of me. I watched him grow into a full-grown man and an incredible young businessman. I still remember the first time when he pushed up on me with his tape. Most rappers, when they push up on Snoop Dogg with a tape, this is their line. Hey, dog, listen to my music. I can make you $1 million. Nipsey's line was, hey, homie, listen to my music. Just give it a listen. That's it? No record deal? You don't want to get put on? So to me, he had vision to know and understand that I don't want to be handed out nothing. I'm going to come get mine.
A life well lived. Any small, quick thoughts on this memorial?
Well, I think that certainly a celebration of life is the best way to put it. And it also reminds us that we have this stereotypical vision of what people from the hood, especially rappers, are. And he was a vision of what it could be. I mean, the man had music that reached across oceans and across continents and across generations. And to have so many people come together to honor him, not just for his music, but for what he did in not leaving the community.
Yeah.
He stayed in the community and tried to build something. That was just incredible, and I think it's something to be proud of.
Absolutely.
I just think that this is a testimony as to how somebody doesn't have to be perfect in order to make an impact, because no one up there said that Nipsey was perfect. No one up there, likened him to Jesus or anything like that. He was a human being who did his best to be his best.
Absolutely.
And he was cut short in his prime while he was trying to do his best.
Absolutely.
So, let this be a testimony as to, how to, move forward. Like Lauren London said at the end of her eulogy to Nipsey, she said the marathon continues. You just have to keep going.
Absolutely.
You have to keep striving for perfection. And I feel like that service was the catalyst for a lot of people in doing so.
Absolutely, and let's hope that this man that was arrested is released, because the bottom line is everyone knows that Nipsey was about providing opportunities for people who were transitioning from incarceration to being back in the community. And the fact that they would take advantage of someone who too was victimized in order to add to the sort of over-incarceration of black men is absolutely unconscionable. And I hope that the people of LA rise up and make sure that that man is released. In terms of this next story, it's really interesting because we're going to talk about this issue of body image. So body dysmorphic disorder is a mental condition in which you can't stop thinking about one or more perceived defects or flaws in your appearance, a flaw that to others is either minor or not observable. But you may feel so ashamed and anxious that you may avoid many social situations. A new essay published by the Black Youth Project and written by Nigerian-American Cornell University freshman Gloria Oladipo argues that negative views of our own bodies can and do lead to an obsessive focus on our body's dysmorphia. Dysmorphia just means a deformity or abnormality in the shape or size of a specified part of the body. She writes in part, the stigma around having black features, the traditional large nose and fuller lips, can evoke a specific racialized body dysmorphia, one where these features are obsessively viewed as beastly, wow, and unattractive. My body looked damaged to me, a substantial barrier to the many goals that were already hard to achieve as a black woman. Black body dysmorphia is a learned behavior, something that we as black women do not do to ourselves. Undoing it and learning to even have a neutral relationship with our bodies is an arduous process that will require patience and self-compassion. You know, I find this whole issue of body dysmorphia specific to black women very interesting, because when I look at broader culture, and this is not just something that just kind of happened with the Kardashian clan, for as long as I can remember, we've had other women, specifically white women, trying to look like black women. So, you know, I just find it, you know, it's really sad to think that as black women, that some of us struggle with this lack of ability to appreciate our own beauty.
I'll be transparent. It took me a long time to accept the fact that I was beautiful in my own right. Why? Because the environment around me wasn't, outside of family and friends, of course, the environment around me wasn't, you know, reinforcing that fact. You know, I studied communications, and what do you do in that role? Like, you're in front of the camera or you're engaging with other people. And from jump, I was told, you know, straighten your hair, contour your nose, make sure your cheekbones look even higher than they already are without makeup. You know, I'm plus size, so I had to wear the Spanx and the pantyhose on top of the Spanx, and then, you know, sometimes even buy my arms so my arms would look smaller.
Wow.
You know, it's a lot on the psyche. So I can understand what she was saying with that, but at the end of the day, I hope she understands now that she's beautiful and that this is just an objective article, because she is in her own right, and the women who read that article are beautiful in their own right. And they don't need a Eurocentric point of view to reinforce their beauty. We have that from within, and that's what I had to find out for myself.
So what are your thoughts on this, Teresa? I mean, is this something that either you or someone in your family or some of your friends, have you seen anyone in your circle struggle with this issue of, to some degree, a lack of acceptance of our own unique form of beauty?
Gratefully, I would say no. So I'm actually the youngest of 8 siblings. One, I have my sister between my mom and my dad, and she's completely light-skinned. And so I'm always, you know, my mom's light-skinned, my dad, pretty much my complexion, a little darker. And I never really asked that question of, you know, why am I this color? If anything, I love my brownish tan. But what I did see that was a little interesting to me, because I am a reality show type of person, and my guilty pleasure outside of watching CNN. So
that's everybody's guilty.
Okay.
And Roland Martin. But Love and Hip Hop, you know, Atlanta, they featured something pretty recently about a Jamaican rapper. Literally comes from Jamaica. Her name was Spice, and she bleached her skin. So when they aired the episode, you know, because they taped it months in advance. And so when they finally aired it a few weeks ago, I was shocked because she was, darker than me, and her explanation of why she did it was literally because she felt like in America she could just do anything she wants and be, from that international star to the American music star, and they would accept me in this way, right? And it was like almost if you looked a little different, then maybe your sound would change and people would start to more so be more loving to what you're deserving. And I think, again, we just really need to think about American culture. That's not us. Yes, we're accepting, but accepting with explanation, right?
Yeah.
Accepted with purpose. And so, when I see that, it hurts my heart, because I love the skin that I'm in, and there are many others that do. But for those who don't, I think we need to, if we see each other in passing, the little things. I love you and you look beautiful. Girl, your hair is on fire. The little things like that, I think, will help with some of that
Absolutely.
Unfortunate trauma that exists.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering also if there's a bit of a generational dynamic to this, because I think about, for example, when I started my locks over 20 years ago, my mother, I thought she was going to have a heart attack. She was like, "You will never get a job." It was like complete, and there's obviously, you alluded to this. Your hair's nappy, that whole situation happened, and they just had to learn to love it. I didn't really care, but they had to. They grew into accepting it, and also this issue of my mother's beautiful. My mother's absolutely beautiful, but to this day she will complain about her nose. She just feels like if I could just have a slimmer nose, to this day, she is 90.
Wow.
And she still struggles with her nose, which to me, she's beautiful. So it's there. So I'm just, once again, I'm saying, is this a generational thing, or is this something that still, because we don't oftentimes see a lot of reflections of our beauty proliferating our culture, that unfortunately this is something that still some of our younger girls still have to deal with?
It's definitely a generational thing, but I do think this younger generation is getting better with image, because thankfully there are, if only a little bit, there's still more images that look like us than it was for my time as it was for your time.
Absolutely.
I was just at a career day at a high school in D.C., and even before I even spoke, I was just walking the halls and seeing the students, 15, 16 years old, just kind of crisscrossing the hallways, going to class and whatever. And these girls had the most beautiful afros I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Crochet braids, box braids, straightened out hair, wands, all this stuff. And I'm only maybe 10, 15 years older than you. Would never have caught me with an afro like that in high school, ever, because it would have been a distraction,
Right, yeah.
right? It would have been, oh, I can't see the teacher because of your fro. And the fact that they don't even have that.
But some schools are still penalizing.
Some schools are doing that.
And that was a point that I wanted to make really quickly, is that you do get penalized for trying to look natural. You do get penalized for trying to be yourself and trying to be you in your own skin.
Yeah.
Professionally, yes, your locks 10 years ago might have been a distraction, might have kept you from getting a job. You don't know.
Yeah.
But the other problem is that it's not just American culture, it's white dominance globally.
Yeah.
Because some of the best-selling beauty products are lighteners in Africa. And it's because of a constantly reinforced message. And you ask if it was generational, certainly 60s, 70s, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Angela Davis Fro was making a comeback. And so we've had to have these affirmations coming out of the 50s and 60s, in the 60s and the 70s. Then we had affirmations kind of fade away. I remember a button I saw in the 80s, happy I'm nappy, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. But now we're coming back into it where we're having to regain and regrasp that sense of pride and that sense of ownership that you are beautiful who you
As
in
is.
your skin.
Yeah.
And as is. And it's having to have this constant pushback, because even though that is coming from self, you do have institutions that will push back and try to denigrate it.
One quick thing about that, too, is going back, for example, to the Nipsey funeral, there was a bit of controversy when one of the rappers made this comment about raising beautiful light-skinned daughters. And so, I love my brothers. However, okay, we got to check that, okay? We got to check that. So what responsibility is it of our brothers to affirm us in the diversity of our beauty, and not only sort of look for the lightest, the brightest, the damn near whitest to be able to say, oh, that's my image of Black beauty?
It's on the brothers, no question. And I find myself even, kind of trying to internalize it myself, where it's okay, this seems gorgeous sisters with dark skin that just is, make your heart melt. And embrace that, and do tell them that, you know what, your skin is just fine the way it is. You find yourself, and it's something that has to be conscious, because we have been socialized ourselves as African American men. We're scary, and a rejection of that. I have some friends who are exclusively going towards the light end of the spectrum, and I think that's kind of tragic. Talk to them about that. What's the issue? Why can't try to have a discussion about why that may not necessarily be the way to go.
Yeah. Wow. We still got a lot of work to do, y'all. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, some Black girl magic.
The last vestige of racism in the West will be intellectual racism. Scholar and critic Henry Louis Gates Jr.
So for today's HBCU Giving Day, the school is University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. It is located in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and was founded in 1873. Notable alumni include Smokey Norfolk, Taryn Armstead, Danny K. Davis, and Don Zimmerman. To donate to University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, please visit uapb.edu. That's uapb.edu. So calling all HBCU alumni, students, and leaders, enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement their proposal. The deadline to apply has been extended to April 15th, that's Monday. So go to fgb.life for more information and to apply. Ford goes further in our community. Next, Marsai Martin, a star on ABC's Blackish, has become the youngest executive producer in Hollywood history. Her movie, Little, premieres this weekend in theaters. Take a look at how she was able to pull this off.
Well, growing up, my mom's favorite film was Big, starring Tom Hanks. And of course, with parents like them, they show you like music, TV, whatever they saw when they were growing up. And I saw that, and I was like, well, what if we do maybe something different from it, and maybe just reverse it a little bit and make it more of a modern perspective. So that's how it came to be. Talked to my parents about it. Then we went to Kenya, and then we went to Will, and then we went to Universal. Then the rest was history. So now we're here.
Marsai, a little 10-year-old comes in and pitches a movie to like a Hollywood producer who does that and does it well, and like is really like clear in the way she sees the movie, and like is not afraid and is very very self-assured and confident in the way that she saw this movie playing out. I was like, dang, I might need to work for you someday, and I might. I have 2 daughters, and my youngest is the same age as Marsai, and I realized there are not a lot of movies where she sees herself on screen. There are not a lot of aspirational type movies where, she can identify with the protagonist, with a lead character, with a heroine that looks like her. And I thought that was very cool.
The story about how she brought the idea in helped me sort of make the ground the idea of how there are Black girls in this world doing incredible things. Like, that's a miracle in itself, that a 10-year-old girl could come through Universal Studios and say, I have an idea for my first feature film. And it was the combination of just the idea that it hadn't been done and her gumption and just spiritness about coming in and bringing that idea. I just saw that girl walking through the halls of Universal, just like how much courage and belief that it takes to do that. And I thought, oh, I'm curious about this project and her as an actress specifically. Women came around Marsai to support her and lend the magic that they've created in their own life to lift her up to make her first feature.
So the studio put together a feature on all the black girl magic on display on the set. Take a look.
Hello?
Wake up! Move! Ding dong! Ding dong!
Were you always mean?
I got big and I got rich. So now who gonna check me, boo?
I wish you were my age. Then I'd check you. Boo, I wish you were little.
What in the black Jesus? The black girl magic came strong with this one. In front of the scenes, behind the scenes, you know, you have Tina directing, you have Marsai who pitched this movie.
It's kind of surprising having this idea in your bedroom and then it just changes into this whole big old production, which I am very grateful to Universal for believing in this young little black girl.
I will agree to cover for you at the office if you agree to promote me to creative exec.
Well, look whose balls just dropped.
There are a lot of amazing women who are part of this project behind camera who really put all their creativity into it.
Yes, I did it! What?
We got a lot of magic going on.
There are black girls in this world doing incredible things, like Marsai Martin herself. Like, she embodied black girl magic.
See? Oh.
The movie opens today, so guess what I'll be doing this weekend, right? So I want to take a minute to thank the panel for joining us both here in person and virtually. That's it for this edition of Roland Martin Unfiltered. Don't forget, you can support Roland Martin Unfiltered by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com and becoming a member of the Bring the Funk Fan Club. As Roland says so rightly, we need to fund our own freedom. And as we do every Friday, we will be showing a list of new members supporting the show. I'm Dr. Avis, in for Roland Martin, and we will be back on Monday. Holla!
I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.